Over the years, the percentage of the popular vote that Gerald Ford lost by has increased from about 2% to about 5% because of Ford's pardoning of Nixon. Remember that for a century, the American public has been preached to by the establishment that no American is above the law, including the president. All of this was put to the lie. Some commentators have expressed themselves in terms of it having been absolutely necessary for Ford to pardon Nixon, but to do it at the earliest possible moment, lest the investigation against Nixon come up with some very unseemly information that would not only bring down Nixon, but also Gerald Ford and a good deal of the Republican Party. And Ford was too stalwart a Republican to let that happen. After having become unsuccessful in structuring Ford's running as a co-president with Ronald Reagan during the Republican convention in the summer of 1980, Ford immediately got to work with Sandy Weill as a member of the board of directors at Citicorp. But it did not end there. Ford also obtained the unusual position of being a consultant with Citicorp as well as a member of their board. This producer has had his own prominent board of directors and knows a lot about the dissemination of valuable and fiduciary information that transpired both before and after board of directors meetings throughout America. The American public does not understand what is effectuated in interlocking directorates. And this has been the thorn in the side of business reformers for many decades, because underlying them are mostly obvious conflicts of interest and not so obvious conflicts of interest, etc. Other presidents, having heard or seen what General Ford was doing with the aura of the presidency, the three presidents being Nixon, Carter, and even Ronald Reagan, accused Ford of, in quotes, unseemly profiteering, end quote. See DeFrank's book, Write It When I'm Gone, page 86, which is a biography of Gerald Ford. Now, if that does not have the same guilt ring to it that John Connally said after being hit in the car accompanying JFK in Dallas by gunfire, in quotes, they're going to kill us all. Perhaps one should have their third ear put into gear. Carter's criticism of Ford came swiftly in 1981 with, in quotes, I think that it is inappropriate for an ex-president to be involved in the commercial world, end quotes. But this only inspired Ford to yet commercialize his endeavors even more, notwithstanding the fact that Newsweek magazine did a story about same in 1981. Excuse me. When one thinks through what Carter said about Ford commercializing the presidency, it occurs to one that Carter might have understated the matter. For if Carter had heard that Ford might have been committing crimes, then Carter might have been very reluctant to say anything too close to that, since Carter might not have been supplied with any hard evidence. But that which he had heard compelled Carter to say at least something. And Carter decided that, in quotes, commercialization was the most appropriate choice of terms. Ford had something of a penchant to continue to use his power as though Ford still had quasi-power left over from his presidency. Considering that both Nixon and Reagan were also Republicans who were critical of Ford, they may have been even more hesitant to be specific in any public statement, but that the two of them found Ford's actions too egregious not to say anything, so they said something, but they channeled it in a more restricted manner. Ronald Reagan, as of November 1, 1981, was the Republican candidate for president and would win the presidency just days later. Reagan previously had been governor of California from 1965 until 1969. American law clearly states that any American who makes contact with the enemy has committed treason. This is true even if that person has held high office previously. Let us now deal with well-established facts. The term October surprise has been around for a number of decades and has been in the subject matter of several books. This term came into being, I believe, around Ronald Reagan being elected president in November 1980. Pardon me. But some investigators started to look into the swap of American hostages from 1979 overthrow of the U.S. Embassy in Iran for arms. It was speculated that Reagan's staff had had contact with America's enemy, Iran, prior to the election of 1980, in which Reagan was challenging Jimmy Carter for president. A good number of these books about October surprise, if not most of these books about October surprise, contend that the chances were very high that an illegal contact had been made by someone on Reagan's staff, probably William Casey, who later became Reagan's director of the CIA in 1981, and stayed in that position until he mysteriously died in 1988, just before he was to testify to Congress. The reason that most investigators thought that it was William Casey who had first made contact with the Iranian authorities was because Casey had been an American intelligence OSS in the Second World War. One would have thought that President Carter's CIA would have reported to President Carter about these shenanigans by Reagan surrogates, but evidently this was not the case. Actually, this matter discloses a great secret that most Americans cannot wrap their brains around, and that specifically is that a U.S. government agency actually belongs to one of our national parties, as if made manifest by just some of the following facts. CIA headquarters was plastered with signs promoting the first Bush candidacy in 1980, prior to Reagan having been chosen as the Republican candidate. Stated within the context of the immediately above fact is that the first Bush was placed as a director of the CIA by Gerald Ford in late 1975, where he served only about little more than 1 year. The CIA was so enamored of the first Bush, for the CIA had worked with the first Bush as far back as the 1940s, if not sooner. It should be noted that in 1976, when the first Bush was director, there was a huge car explosion in downtown Washington, D.C. that killed the leftist leader from Latin America, Letelier. This was both the first and last time that there was a terrorism practiced in downtown Washington, D.C. The terrorist organization was virtually undoubtedly the CIA, that very organization that has taken on the responsibility of capturing terrorists. Instead, practices the very thing that it is supposed to be protecting the American public from. And the head of the terrorist organization, in this case, was the first Bush, was the chief terrorist. The first Bush reciprocated the adoration effect that Bush received from the CIA and its employees and flew down to Georgia in 1976 and saw the president-elect Jimmy Carter and tried to get Carter to do something that the political parties just have not done since the end of the Second World War. That is to say, that the new incoming political party to allow the losing party to keep a cabinet-level position in the new administration. But the first Bush was turned down by President-elect Carter, a Democrat. And Carter appointed Sansfield Turner as director of the CIA. And remember that it was Gerald Ford who picked and placed the first Bush into the director's chair at the CIA. Thank you.